There is a heartbeat older than human memory, steadier than your own pulse, more reliable than sunrise itself. It moves without sound through every ocean on Earth, lifting billions of tons of water twice each day with the patience of geological time and the precision of a Swiss timepiece. You've felt this rhythm if you've ever stood on a beach and watched the waves creep higher up the sand, then slowly retreat, leaving behind treasures of shells and seaweed like gifts from an ancient friend. This is the breath of our planet, the endless dance of tides that has shaped every coastline you've ever seen, carved every harbor where ships have found refuge, and created the rhythms that countless cultures have used to mark time itself. For over 4 billion years, this cosmic metronome has never missed a beat, never paused, never faltered in its patient work of stirring the seas and refreshing the shores. Picture the Maine coast at dawn, where fishing boats rise and fall with swells that carry the moon's gentle command from deep water to rocky shore. Imagine Venice at twilight, where ancient stones reflect waters that ebb and flow according to celestial schedules written before human civilization began. Think of the Bay of Fundy, where tides reach 50 feet in height, transforming the landscape so completely that what was ocean at breakfast becomes walking ground by lunch. But what if, tomorrow morning, this ancient rhythm simply stopped? What if you woke to find the ocean as still as a mountain lake, its surface unbroken by the rolling swells that have defined the boundary between land and sea since continents first formed? What if the heartbeat that has sustained marine ecosystems, guided human navigation, and powered the circulation of our planet's waters simply ceased? The question hangs in the air like morning mist, beautiful and unsettling. To imagine a world without tides is to imagine Earth itself fundamentally transformed, as if some cosmic conductor had suddenly silenced the orchestra that has been playing the symphony of our planet's motion through space. To understand what we might lose, we must first appreciate the elegant simplicity of what drives Earth's tides. Far above us, the moon traces its monthly path through space, pulling at our planet with invisible threads of gravity that stretch across 250,000 miles of emptiness. It's a cosmic tug-of-war played out on a scale that dwarfs human experience, yet gentle enough that we feel it only as the slow rise and fall of water at our feet. Imagine Earth and Moon as dance partners locked in an eternal waltz, neither quite able to let go, neither quite able to come together. The moon pulls at our oceans with gravitational fingers that are strongest on the side of Earth facing toward it, lifting water into a great bulge that follows our satellite around the planet. But here's where the dance becomes beautifully complex. On Earth's far side, another bulge forms where the moon's pull is weakest, creating twin tides on opposite sides of our world. The Earth spins beneath these bulges. Coastal regions rotate through high and low water with clockwork precision. The sun joins this celestial choreography, sometimes reinforcing the moon's pull during spring tides, sometimes working against it during neap tides, but always participating in the gravitational conversation that has shaped our world since both luminaries first hung in Earth's sky. This balance is far more delicate than it appears. The moon must maintain exactly the right distance from Earth, close enough for its gravity to overcome the forces that would let our oceans settle into perfect stillness, but far enough away that it doesn't tear our atmosphere away entirely. Earth must spin at precisely the right speed to create the rhythm we know, and our planet's tilt must remain stable enough that the dance doesn't spiral into chaos. The mathematics of this cosmic ballet involve forces so vast they move continents, yet so precise they can be calculated to predict the height of tomorrow's tide within inches. It's a system that has found perfect balance through billions of years of gravitational negotiation. Like a song that has been playing so long we've forgotten its music. But systems in perfect balance are also systems that can be disrupted. If one partner in this cosmic dance were to stumble, if one gravitational relationship were to shift beyond its carefully maintained boundaries, the consequences would ripple through every aspect of our planet's behavior. If one step in this dance falters, what happens to Earth? Dawn breaks over the Pacific, and something is wrong. From California to Japan, from Alaska to Australia, people wake to an ocean they have never seen before, a vast mirror that stretches to the horizon without a single wave disturbing its surface. The familiar sound of surf against shore has vanished, replaced by a silence so complete it seems to press against the ears like cotton. In Monterey Bay, where sea otters usually ride the gentle swells, the animals float motionless on water that looks like polished glass. Seabirds that depend on wave action to churn up their food circle overhead in confusion, crying out to an ocean that no longer responds to their ancient expectations. The kelp forests that sway with every tide now stand perfectly straight, like underwater trees in a world without wind. Surfers gather on Malibu beaches, staring at an ocean that has forgotten how to move. The waves they've ridden since childhood simply aren't there. Not small waves, not big waves, but no waves at all. The water sits exactly where high tide left it the night before, as if time itself has stopped at the edge of the sea. Some laugh nervously, others take photos of the impossible stillness. But many just stand in silence, instinctively understanding that they're witnessing something that violates the natural order of their world. In New England fishing villages, lobster boats sit motionless in harbors where the water level hasn't changed in hours. Tide charts become meaningless artifacts overnight. Fishermen who have timed their lives to the rhythm of high and low water find themselves adrift in a suddenly unpredictable world. The smell changes too. Without wave action to mix oxygen into the surface water, the air begins to carry a subtle staleness, like breath held too long. Children building sandcastles discover that the ocean no longer threatens their architectural ambitions. The waves that would normally erase their work in playful inevitability simply aren't coming. Parents watch uneasily as their children venture closer to the motionless water, some ancient instinct warning them that this stillness is beautiful but wrong. Like a sleeping giant that might wake in terrible ways, the absence of sound becomes the most unsettling element of all. Coastal residents realize they've spent their entire lives unconsciously listening to the ocean's voice, the crash of breakers, the hiss of foam on sand, the deep rumble of swells rolling in from distant storms. Without these sounds, coastal towns feel incomplete, as if someone has stolen half the notes from the symphony of their daily lives. But this eerie calm is only the surface of a transformation that reaches far deeper than most will ever realize. The tides that have stopped weren't just moving water, they were the circulatory system of our planet's marine life. And their sudden absence begins to trigger cascades of change that will touch every shore on Earth. The first casualties of the Great Stillness emerge within hours. In ports around the world, massive cargo ships designed to rise and fall with predictable tides find themselves trapped by their own immobility. Container vessels that entered harbors expecting the tide to lift them over shallow bars now sit stranded, their hulls scraping bottom in channels that should be safely deep. The global supply chain, already fragile from climate change and economic pressures, grinds to a halt as maritime traffic becomes impossible to coordinate without the reliable rhythm of tidal schedules. Fishing fleets face an even more immediate crisis. Boats that left port expecting to return with the evening tide discover that evening tide simply isn't coming. Harbor mouths that were safely navigable at high water become treacherous obstacle courses at what should be low water levels. In places like Gloucester and New Bedford, where fishing has sustained communities for centuries, captains radio shore with confusion and growing alarm as familiar. Landmarks refuse to appear and disappear according to the ancient schedules there. Fathers and grandfathers relied upon the lobster industry along Maine's coast faces catastrophe within days. Lobster traps are set based on precise knowledge of tidal flows that carry scents and nutrients to attract their prey. Without these currents, traps that should be productive become empty boxes sitting in stagnant water. Lobstermen who have inherited generations of knowledge about where to place their gear find that wisdom suddenly worthless in an ocean that no longer moves according to natural law. Wetlands begin their slow death almost immediately. Salt marshes from Georgia to Nova Scotia depend on the twice-daily rhythm of salt water advancing and retreating to maintain the delicate balance of salinity that allows specialized plants to thrive. Without fresh inputs of seawater, these grasslands begin to wither, their distinctive salt-tolerant vegetation giving way to freshwater plants that can't provide the same ecological services. The nurseries where countless fish species spend their juvenile stages start to transform into something unrecognizable. Beaches themselves begin to change in ways that seem impossible to those who understand them as permanent features of the landscape. Without wave action to constantly rework the sand, without tidal flow to carry away and redistribute sediments, coastlines start to develop strange new contours. Some areas accumulate sand that would normally be swept away, while others begin to erode in patterns that follow no familiar logic. The dynamic equilibrium between land and sea that has shaped every shoreline on Earth starts to unravel, creating landscapes that look increasingly alien to those who call these places home. But this is only the beginning. The tides that have stopped weren't just convenient schedules for human activity. They were the invisible guardians that kept Earth's marine ecosystems alive and healthy. And their absence begins to trigger consequences that will eventually touch every living thing on the planet, beneath the surface of the eerily still waters. A catastrophe is unfolding that will make human inconveniences seem trivial by comparison. The tides that have ceased weren't just moving water from place to place. They were Earth's great mixing spoons, stirring nutrients from the deep ocean up to sunlit surface waters where microscopic plants could transform them into the foundation of all marine life that lie in the depths where no sunlight penetrates. Bacteria and other organisms constantly produce nutrients through the decomposition of organic matter that drifts down from above. Normally, tidal forces help drive deep ocean currents that carry these nutrients back toward the surface, creating a vast recycling system that has sustained marine ecosystems for billions of years. Without this mixing, surface waters begin to starve while deeper waters become oversaturated with nutrients that have nowhere to go. The first visible sign appears as vast blooms of algae that spread across the stagnant surface like green and brown carpets, stretching to the horizon. Without tidal currents to disperse them, these blooms grow unchecked, some species producing toxins that turn the water into poison for fish, marine mammals, and seabirds. Dead zones begin to expand from isolated patches into continent-sized areas where oxygen levels drop so low that nothing can survive. Coral reefs, already stressed by climate change and warming oceans, face their final crisis as the water around them becomes increasingly stagnant. These underwater rainforests depend on constant water movement to bring fresh nutrients and oxygen while carrying away waste products. Without tidal flow, even the healthiest reefs begin to suffocate, their brilliant colors fading to the pale white of mass bleaching as billions of coral polyps die in waters that can no longer sustain them. The collapse ripples up through the food chain with frightening speed. Small fish that depend on tidal currents to concentrate their plankton prey find their food sources scattered and depleted. Larger predators that hunt in areas where tides create predictable feeding opportunities discover that their prey has vanished along with the currents that once brought them together. Whales and dolphins, master navigators of tidal flows and currents, become disoriented in waters that no longer carry the chemical and acoustic signals they use to find food and navigate across ocean basins. Seabirds face perhaps the cruelest fate of all. Species like gannets and pelicans that have evolved to hunt in the churning waters created by tidal interactions with underwater topography find themselves circling above lifeless seas. The upwelling currents that once brought fish close to the surface have vanished, leaving these magnificent flyers to exhaust themselves diving into empty waters. Coastal colonies that have existed for thousands of years begin to abandon their traditional nesting sites as parents can no longer find food to feed their young. The ocean's ability to regulate its own chemistry starts to fail as stagnation allows pollution and waste to concentrate instead of being diluted and dispersed by tidal action. Plastics that once traveled on currents around the world's oceans now accumulate in massive floating islands that grow larger each day. Chemical pollutants that tides once diluted below harmful levels begin to reach concentrations that poison entire ecosystems. But perhaps the most ominous change is the gradual warming of surface waters that can no longer exchange heat with the deeper, cooler layers of the ocean. This warming accelerates the chemical processes that consume dissolved oxygen, creating a feedback loop that spreads dead zones even faster while disrupting the ocean's role in regulating Earth's climate. Above the stagnant seas, Earth's weather systems begin to behave like a symphony orchestra that has lost its conductor. the ocean currents that help distribute heat from the tropics to the poles, driven in part by tidal mixing, weaken and eventually stall. Without these vast conveyor belts of moving water, climate patterns that have remained stable for thousands of years start to shift in ways that confuse meteorologists and terrify those who understand the implications. The first changes appear in coastal regions where sea breezes once moderated temperatures between day and night. These gentle winds, created by the temperature difference between land and sea, depend partly on the constant churning of surface waters by tidal action. As the oceans become increasingly stagnant and warm unevenly, these moderating breezes become erratic and then disappear entirely, leaving coastal cities to experience temperature swings more characteristic of continental interiors. Fog patterns along major coastlines begin to shift in ways that disrupt ecosystems and human activities alike. The famous fogs of San Francisco and the redwood forests of Northern California depend on the interaction between cold ocean currents and warm air masses. As ocean currents weaken without tidal reinforcement, these fog patterns become unreliable, threatening both the tourism industry and the ancient trees that have adapted to survive on moisture condensed from marine air. Hurricane formation starts to follow new and more dangerous patterns. As the ocean loses its ability to regulate surface temperatures through vertical mixing, tropical storms that once weakened as they passed over cooler deep waters now maintain their strength longer, creating more powerful and destructive hurricanes that can maintain Category 4 and 5 intensities far inland. The 2023 Atlantic hurricane season becomes a preview of the new normal, with storms that seem to violate all previous patterns of behavior. Rainfall patterns around the world begin to shift as the evaporation cycles that create weather systems change fundamentally. Regions that have depended on moisture from ocean currents find themselves facing unexpected droughts, while areas that once enjoyed stable, predictable weather experience sudden deluges. As storm systems follow new paths through an atmosphere that no longer receives the moderating influence of well-mixed oceanic air masses, the jet streams that guide weather systems across continents start to wobble more dramatically as the temperature gradients that keep them stable weaken. This leads to weather patterns that seem to get stuck in place for weeks or months, heat domes that refuse to move, atmospheric rivers that flood the same regions repeatedly, and Arctic blasts that penetrate far south of their normal boundaries. Perhaps most ominously, the ocean begins to lose its role as Earth's great carbon sink. Normally, tidal mixing helps transport carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into deep waters where it can remain stored for centuries. Without this process, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels begin to rise even faster than climate change models had predicted, accelerating global warming beyond the most pessimistic projections. The feedback loops between ocean stagnation and atmospheric disruption create a cascade of changes that make weather forecasting increasingly impossible, leaving human civilization to face climate chaos without the buffering influence of the oceans that have moderated Earth's climate for billions of years. The great coastal megacities where half of humanity makes its home. The collapse of tidal systems triggers social and economic disruptions that ripple far beyond maritime industries. New York Harbor, once one of the world's busiest ports, becomes a maze of stranded vessels and unusable infrastructure as water levels remain fixed at heights that make normal operations impossible. The city's famous resilience, tested by hurricanes and economic crises, faces a challenge unlike any in its history, as the very foundation of its maritime economy simply ceases to function. Miami's relationship with the sea becomes increasingly precarious, as the absence of tidal flushing allows pollution and algae blooms to accumulate in Biscayne Bay. The city's tourism industry, already struggling with the effects of climate change and sea level rise, watches helplessly as the azure waters that draw millions of visitors each year turn green and toxic. Luxury waterfront developments find themselves overlooking dead zones instead of pristine ocean views. Tokyo Bay, where millions depend on seafood harvested according to tidal schedules refined over centuries, faces food security crises as traditional fishing grounds become barren. The city's famous fish markets, including the renowned Tsukiji struggle to source the fresh seafood that has been central to Japanese cuisine since ancient times. Cultural practices tied to the phases of the moon and the rhythm of tides begin to lose their meaning as the natural cycles they commemorate no longer exist. The most realistic threat to Earth's tidal systems comes not from cosmic catastrophes, but from human activities that, while not capable of stopping tides entirely, could significantly disrupt the marine ecosystems that depend on tidal circulation. Climate change is already altering sea levels, ocean temperatures, and current patterns in ways that affect how tides behave in coastal regions around the world. Large-scale geoengineering projects, massive coastal development, and the construction of sea barriers designed to protect against rising sea levels could potentially interfere with tidal flows enough to create localized versions of the stagnation we've imagined. While these human interventions could never stop global tides, they might be sufficient to destroy the delicate ecological balances that depend on tidal circulation in specific regions. Even if tides never vanish entirely, humans may be the ones disrupting them in ways that echo the catastrophic scenario we've explored, creating dead zones and disrupting marine ecosystems through our own interventions in the natural systems that have sustained life on Earth for billions of years. While cosmic disasters remain in the realm of speculation, human activities are already beginning to alter tidal systems in ways that provide disturbing previews of what a world with disrupted tides might look like. Climate change, driven by greenhouse gas emissions that continue to rise despite international agreements, is warming ocean waters and altering the density differences that help drive tidal currents around the world. Sea level rise, accelerating as ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica melt faster than scientists predicted even a decade ago, is changing the geometry of coastal areas in ways that alter how tidal forces interact with shorelines. Bays and estuaries that once experienced predictable tidal ranges find their patterns shifting as deeper water allows larger tidal bores to penetrate farther inland, while other areas experience reduced tidal flow as rising seas overtop natural barriers that once channeled tidal currents. The construction of massive sea barriers designed to protect cities like London, Venice, and New York from storm surges inevitably interferes with natural tidal flows. While these engineering marvels may be necessary to protect human settlements from the effects of climate change, they also create artificial restrictions on the movement of water that can reduce tidal circulation in the very areas they're designed to protect. River damming and diversion projects affect tides far from their inland locations by altering the flow of fresh water that helps maintain the salinity gradients essential for healthy estuarine ecosystems. The Colorado River, so heavily diverted for human use that it rarely reaches the sea, once created tidal interactions in its delta that sustained vast wetlands and fisheries. Similar patterns of river alteration around the world are eliminating the freshwater inputs that many tidal systems require to function properly. Coastal development that fills in wetlands and straightens natural shorelines eliminates the complex topography that allows tidal forces to create the diverse habitats essential for marine life. Urban waterfronts may look more orderly with their concrete seawalls and geometric harbors, but they lack the intricate channels and varying depths that allow tidal energy to support complex ecosystems. Perhaps most insidiously, the warming of ocean waters due to climate change is beginning to alter the fundamental physics of tidal circulation. Warmer water is less dense and holds less dissolved oxygen, reducing the efficiency of the vertical mixing that tides create. Ocean currents that depend partly on tidal reinforcement are weakening as temperature differences between surface and deep waters decrease. The accumulation of plastic pollution in oceanic gyres creates artificial barriers to water movement that can interfere with the large-scale circulation patterns that tides help maintain. These floating islands of debris don't stop tides directly, but they can alter current patterns in ways that reduce the mixing and circulation that healthy marine ecosystems require. Are we unknowingly pushing Earth toward its own version of the still waters we've imagined, not through cosmic catastrophe, but through the cumulative impact of countless human interventions in the natural systems that have sustained our planet's life for billions of years? Tonight, as you read these words, Step outside if you can and listen for the sound that has defined Earth's relationship with the sea since before continents took their current shapes. Somewhere, even if you live far from any coast, the ocean is breathing, rising, and falling with the same patient rhythm that has marked time on our planet for longer than complex life has existed. The waves rolling onto beaches tonight carry within them the gravitational signature of the moon hanging above, the same moon that has guided this dance for 4.5 billion years. Each wave represents a conversation between worlds, a message sent across the void of space and translated into the liquid language that all life on Earth understands at the cellular level. But as you listen to that eternal rhythm, consider how fragile it might be, not in the cosmic sense, where catastrophic disruptions remain safely in the realm of speculation, but in the human sense, where our activities are beginning to alter the delicate systems that make tidal circulation possible, the dead zones spreading in our oceans, the warming waters that can no longer circulate efficiently, the barriers we build and the rivers we divert. These represent our species' first tentative steps toward the kind of oceanic stagnation that would transform our planet beyond recognition. The miracle isn't just that tides exist, but that they've persisted through every crisis our planet has faced: asteroid impacts, ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, and the emergence of an intelligent species that has the power to alter global systems without fully understanding the consequences of its actions. The constancy of tides has been one of the most reliable features of Earth throughout geological time, a rhythm so fundamental that we've built our understanding of time itself around its patterns. Yet constancy should not be mistaken for permanence. The tidal forces that seem eternal operate within systems that can be disrupted, altered, or damaged by changes that happen far faster than the geological processes that created them. Climate change, pollution, and coastal development are beginning to test the resilience of oceanic systems that have endured for millions of millennia. The responsibility we carry as the first species capable of planetary-scale influence extends to protecting the tidal systems that may have made our existence possible in the first place. The still waters we've imagined as catastrophe could become reality not through cosmic accident, but through human negligence, created not by the sudden disappearance of the moon, but by the gradual degradation of the earthly systems that allow tidal forces to sustain life. As long as the tides move, so does life itself, in the circulation of nutrients that feeds marine ecosystems, in the mixing of waters that maintains ocean health, in the rhythm that connects every shoreline on Earth to the cosmic forces that govern planetary motion. The pulse you can hear in the distance tonight is not just the ocean breathing, but life itself continuing the conversation with the cosmos that began in tidal pools billions of years ago and continues in every wave that touches every shore. Listen closely and protect what you hear, for it is more precious than we have ever fully understood. Indigenous communities along coastlines worldwide face the loss of cultural knowledge that has been passed down through countless generations. The Makah people of the Pacific Northwest, whose whaling traditions are timed to ocean conditions created by tidal flows, find that their ancestral hunting grounds no longer support the marine life their ceremonies and sustenance depend upon. Traditional ecological knowledge that once allowed Arctic communities to predict ice formation and wildlife movements becomes obsolete as the ocean systems that shaped this wisdom cease to function. Food security becomes a global crisis as oceanic fisheries, which provide protein for billions of people, collapse faster than land-based agriculture can expand to compensate. The sardine runs off California, the cod grounds of the North Atlantic, the salmon migrations that have sustained Pacific Rim economies for millennia, all become memories as the tidal forces that drove these natural phenomena disappear. Shipping companies face bankruptcy as trade routes that have connected civilizations for thousands of years become unusable. The Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, and major ports from Rotterdam to Singapore find their carefully engineered systems disrupted by water levels that no longer follow predictable patterns. Global supply chains, already fragile from climate change and economic instability, begin to fracture as maritime transportation becomes increasingly unreliable. But perhaps the most profound impact is psychological. Humans have structured their understanding of time, of natural rhythms, of the reliability of natural systems around the constancy of tides. When this most fundamental of Earth's rhythms simply stops, it creates a kind of existential vertigo that goes beyond practical inconveniences to challenge basic assumptions about the stability of the natural world. As months pass without tides, the ocean transforms into something that would be unrecognizable to anyone who knew the seas of the past. What was once a vast, dynamic system of currents and circulation becomes a collection of isolated water masses that develop their own local characteristics without any mechanism for exchange or renewal. The results create oceanic landscapes that seem to belong to an alien world. Plastic pollution, once distributed across ocean basins by currents and tidal flows, begins to concentrate in massive floating continents that block sunlight from reaching the water below. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, once a dispersed area of elevated plastic concentration, becomes a solid mass of debris covering thousands of square miles. Similar formations appear in every ocean basin as waste that once traveled on predictable current systems accumulates wherever the final tide cycle left it stranded. Chemical pollutants follow the same pattern, creating toxic zones where industrial runoff and agricultural chemicals reach concentrations that would have been impossible when tidal action provided constant dilution. Rivers that flow into the sea begin to back up as their outlets become choked with pollutants that can no longer disperse into the broader ocean. Coastal wetlands that once filtered these contaminants become poison landscapes that spread toxicity inland. Rather than processing it safely, the absence of wave action allows sediments to settle in patterns that fundamentally alter underwater topography. Harbor channels that required constant dredging when tides kept sediments in motion become permanently shallow, while deep areas accumulate layers of organic matter that decompose without oxygen, creating hydrogen sulfide that turns the water black and kills any remaining marine life. Coastal erosion patterns change in ways that seem to violate physics. Beaches that once maintained their shape through the constant action of waves and tides begin to develop strange new contours as wind becomes the only force moving sand and sediment. Some coastlines accumulate material that would normally be dispersed, creating artificial barriers and lagoons, while others experience rapid erosion as waves generated by distant storms have no tidal forces to moderate their impact. The smell of the sea itself changes from the clean, salt tang that has characterized ocean air throughout human history to something stagnant and increasingly unpleasant. Without the constant churning that once brought oxygen to surface waters and carried away decay products, coastal regions begin to smell like vast stagnant ponds rather than the fresh, life-giving waters that once defined the boundary between land and sea. Dead zones expand from isolated patches to continental-scale areas of lifeless water. From space, satellites begin to detect vast areas of ocean that reflect light differently, their surfaces unmarked by the biological activity that once created the subtle color variations that indicated healthy marine ecosystems. These dead seas grow larger each month, spreading like a slow plague across waters that once teemed with life. To truly understand what Earth loses when its tides stop, we must step back and consider how rare and precious tidal forces may be in the universe at large. Astronomers searching for potentially habitable worlds around distant stars have begun to recognize tidal activity as one of the key factors that might make the difference between a dead rock and a living world capable of sustaining complex ecosystems. The moon that creates Earth's tides represents a cosmic accident of extraordinary improbability. Our satellite formed when a Mars-sized object collided with the young Earth in a collision so precise that it ejected material that coalesced into a companion world exactly the right size and distance to create the tidal forces that may have been essential for life's emergence. From ancient seas, research suggests that tides may have played a crucial role in concentrating organic molecules in shallow pools, where the chemistry of life could first begin. The regular advance and retreat of tidal waters would have created cycles of concentration and dilution that could have driven the formation of the complex molecules that eventually became the foundation of all biological processes. Without tides, Earth's early oceans might have remained a dilute soup of simple chemicals that never achieved the complexity necessary for life to emerge. The search for exoplanets has revealed how unusual Earth's situation really is. Most planets either orbit too close to their stars to maintain stable water, or too far away to keep it liquid. Those that fall within the habitable zone often lack moons large enough to create significant tidal forces, or have multiple moons whose competing gravitational influences create chaotic tidal patterns that would make it difficult for stable ecosystems to develop. Jupiter's moon Europa provides a compelling example of how tidal forces shape habitability. The gravitational pull of the giant planet flexes Europa's interior, generating enough heat to maintain a liquid ocean beneath miles of ice. Without these tidal forces, Europa would be a frozen, lifeless world. The possibility that this hidden ocean might harbor life depends entirely on the tidal heating that keeps it liquid and drives the circulation that could transport nutrients and energy throughout its depths. When we consider Earth's place in the cosmos, the steady rhythm of our tides becomes not just a local phenomenon, but a rare gift that may be essential for the development of complex life anywhere in the universe. The gravitational dance between Earth and Moon that creates our tides represents a delicate balance that exists in only a tiny fraction of planetary systems, making our world's tidal forces precious beyond measure. The implications extend beyond Earth's past to its future in space exploration. As humans venture to other worlds, we carry with us the biological and psychological heritage of a species shaped by tidal rhythms. Our circadian cycles, our understanding of time, our intuitive grasp of gravitational forces, all have been influenced by billions of years of evolution on a tidally active world. The scenario we've explored, a sudden cessation of Earth's tides, would require cosmic catastrophes so extreme they belong more to science fiction than scientific prediction. For tides to simply stop, the gravitational relationship between Earth, Moon, and Sun would need to be fundamentally altered in ways that would likely destroy life on our planet long before anyone noticed the absence of waves. If the Moon were to suddenly vanish, perhaps captured by a passing rogue planet or destroyed by some cosmic collision, Earth would indeed lose its primary tidal force. But such an event would also destabilize our planet's rotation, eliminate the axial stability that keeps our climate moderate, and subject Earth to gravitational disruptions that would trigger massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The loss of tides would be the least of our concerns in such a scenario. Alternatively, if Earth's rotation were to slow dramatically, perhaps due to the kind of asteroid impact that might have created the Moon in the first place, tidal patterns would indeed change radically. But such an event would also alter day-night cycles, weather patterns, and the magnetic field that protects us from solar radiation. Again, the cessation of normal tides would be only one aspect of a planetary catastrophe that a more plausible, but still extremely unlikely scenario might involve Earth becoming tidally locked to the Sun, as Venus nearly is, with one side permanently facing our star while the other remains in eternal darkness. This would create a world where one hemisphere experienced permanent day while the other froze in permanent night, with tidal forces dramatically reduced but not eliminated entirely.